You either evolve or you're being programmed. Yuval Noah Harari. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. They control you every single day. And the worst part is, you don't even notice. From the moment you open your eyes, something or someone is already steering your thoughts. Not because you're weak, but because you've been trained. Trained to obey, trained to agree, trained to trust voices that don't care about your truth. You scroll your phone, turn on the news, go to work, have conversations, but none of this is really yours. Your reactions are programmed, your values borrowed, your fears planted, and that invisible hand, it's been there since childhood. No one told you how much of your life would be lived on autopilot. They just rewarded you for being manageable, for being polite, for staying silent. You became a good person in a broken system. And now, you can't breathe without asking for permission. You think you're making choices, but most of your decisions are already made for you, long before you even notice them. What you buy, what you fear, what you vote for, what you believe, what you trust. The idea of freedom is sold to you like a brand. But real freedom, it starts where obedience ends, and no one wants you there. You were never taught to question. Doubt was labeled dangerous. Critical thinking felt like betrayal. So you adapted. You trusted teachers who never questioned the system. You absorbed rules without context. You believed news that only told one side. You didn't choose ignorance. You were shaped into it. And this shaping wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. The system doesn't want thinkers. It wants followers who believe they're thinking. That's the trick. To make you feel smart while feeding you ready-made opinions. To make you feel free while guiding every move you make. And it works brilliantly. You're not alone in this. Most people live like this. That's why the world looks the way it does, full of anxiety, division, and confusion. Not because people are stupid, but because they've been trained to stop looking deeper, to accept the surface, to chase the next distraction instead of asking why they feel empty in the first place. But here's the thing no one tells you. Your mind isn't broken. It's hijacked. And the moment you see the strings, you can start cutting them. But you have to want the truth more than you want comfort. And that's where most people fall back asleep, because the truth is heavy. It shatters your identity. It isolates you from the crowd. It makes you question everything, even yourself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing the lies in every sentence, the manipulation behind every smile, the agenda behind every promise. It's painful, but it's also the beginning of something real. This isn't about conspiracy. This is about consciousness, about seeing the patterns, not just around you, but inside you. How many of your fears aren't even yours? How many of your desires were given to you like scripts? How many of your choices come from a need to fit in, to be safe, to avoid rejection? Most people don't live. They repeat, they consume, they perform, and deep down, they feel it. The disconnect, the numbness, the exhaustion that no vacation can fix, because their life isn't theirs, and they don't know how to take it back. But you're here, still watching, still listening, and that means something inside you remembers, something deeper, something louder than the noise, something that refuses to stay asleep. And that's where we begin. You weren't born asleep. You were trained to sleep with your eyes open, trained to follow without knowing, to nod, smile, agree, without even asking why. And every time you tried to resist, they called you difficult, negative, paranoid, They told you that thinking too much would only bring trouble. So you learned to shut it down, to blend in, to act like everyone else. Because survival in this world often means silence. But let's be honest, deep inside, you know something's off. You know that the stories you're told don't add up, that the fear they feed you doesn't feel natural, that the endless talk of freedom, peace, and progress feels more like noise than truth. You know it, but you keep scrolling, keep nodding, keep pretending it's all fine, because questioning it might change everything. And that's the trap. The system survives because you don't speak, because you doubt yourself more than you doubt them, because you were taught that obedience is intelligence, that trust is virtue, that doubt is weakness. But what if doubt is the beginning of real clarity? The truth is, they need you confused. They need you overwhelmed. They need you tired, distracted, emotionally drained. Because clear, focused people are dangerous. People who think, who question, who don't fall for the script. They don't obey. They don't panic on command. They don't follow every rule blindly. And that terrifies those in power. Look around. Everything is designed to pull your attention away from truth. News designed to provoke fear. Ads designed to make you feel small. Schools designed to reward memorization, not thinking. And now, even therapy and wellness are often just more ways to adapt you to a sick system instead of helping you break free from it. If you feel this, really feel this, you're not broken. You're waking up. And that's the most dangerous thing you can do in a world that depends on your sleep. If these words hit something inside you, subscribe to the channel. Let's make sure this truth reaches those who are ready to stop running. And join the Telegram. That's where we go even deeper, beyond what they want you to hear. You weren't meant to be a puppet. You weren't meant to repeat slogans. You weren't meant to survive by shrinking yourself. But waking up will cost you. It will cost you your comfort, your certainty, your false peace. But what you get in return is real. Clarity, sovereignty, depth. A life that finally feels like yours. Most people will reject this. They'll call it extreme. They'll say, you're overthinking. That's what happens when you break out of the cage. The rest will try to pull you back in. But you're not here for comfort. You're here for truth. And truth demands everything. They don't need to silence you if they can distract you. They don't need to chain you if you willingly follow. And most do. Not because they are weak, but because they were never taught how to think for themselves. From childhood, you were told what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's fake. You weren't given tools to explore reality. You were handed a version of it. Pre-approved, sanitized, safe. But safe for who? Real thinking is dangerous. It breaks patterns. It asks forbidden questions. It peels back the curtain and looks where you're not supposed to look. That's why the system doesn't reward critical minds. It punishes them. You get labeled as unstable, aggressive, antisocial. But in reality, you're just not hypnotized anymore. You're starting to see how deep the script runs. Everything around you is a story, a carefully constructed narrative designed to make you feel informed while keeping you compliant. They don't hide control anymore. They flood you with so much noise that you can't tell what's real. One crisis after another. One headline, one tragedy, one new fear. And while you're reacting to the smoke, they're moving in silence behind the curtain. Even your emotions aren't safe. Fear is weaponized. Outrage is manipulated. Compassion is redirected. They don't care what you feel, as long as they can aim it. That's the game. To hijack your mind from the inside and make you believe that your reactions are yours. But most of what you feel is conditioned, rehearsed, installed. Ask yourself, how often do you slow down and ask, who benefits if I believe this? Who wins if I panic right now? Who profits from my fear, my obedience, my silence? These aren't paranoid questions. These are survival questions, because unless you ask them, someone else will keep answering them for you, and they won't answer in your favor. The world isn't random. The chaos you see is often designed, and the people who appear powerful aren't always the ones pulling strings. The true power lies in shaping perception, and that's psychological warfare. They don't need guns if they have your mind. They don't need prisons if you never leave the cage you built in your own head. But here's the paradox. The moment you admit you've been programmed, you begin to deprogram. The moment you see the manipulation, you gain the power to stop feeding it. But that takes courage. It's easier to stay asleep, to stay angry at the wrong enemy, to stay addicted to certainty. But deep down, you already feel it. The cracks in the story, the tension in your body, the quiet voice asking if this is all there is. And when that voice becomes louder than the noise, that's when everything changes. You've been taught to seek comfort instead of truth, to prefer soothing lies over uncomfortable clarity. That's how control works, not by force, but by seduction. They offer you belonging, status, safety. They tell you what's acceptable to feel, what's allowed to question, how to behave to avoid punishment. And slowly, you stop listening to your own inner compass. You trade your voice for approval. You trade your instincts for validation. And before you realize it, you're living a life built on quiet submission to ideas you never chose, to values you never examined, to roles you never asked for. This is how obedience becomes a personality. You start confusing politeness with morality. You believe that following rules makes you good. You forget how to say no, not just to others, but to the systems that train you to betray yourself. Every time you bite your tongue, nod when you disagree, pretend to care when you're numb, you reinforce the cage. A cage made not of bars, but of fears. Fear of rejection, fear of being wrong, fear of being alone. These are the real tools of control. You've been trained to see rebellion as chaos, to view questioning as a threat. But true rebellion isn't about destruction. It's about remembering. Remembering who you were before you were shaped, before you were taught to distrust your own perception, before your imagination was replaced with caution. They don't need to tell you what to think if they can make you afraid to think at all. And here's the truth most can't face. The system doesn't work without your participation. Your silence is its fuel. Your self-doubt is its weapon. Your willingness to stay small, stay agreeable, stay confused, that's what keeps it alive. You don't have to overthrow governments or shout in the streets. You just have to stop lying to yourself. Stop pretending that everything makes sense. Stop acting like obedience is virtue. But the cost of truth is high. You'll lose friends. You'll trigger people. You'll become the one who's changed. Because when you start thinking clearly, you become uncomfortable to those who are still asleep. And most people don't want to wake up. They want to feel right. They want to be told they're good for following the script. They don't want truth. They want permission to keep believing. And that's the lonely part of waking up. You realize how few people actually think, how many simply repeat, how many confuse emotions with arguments. But that loneliness, it's a sign you're alive. It means you're no longer sedated by the illusion. It means you're starting to feel the weight of your own mind again. And once that begins, there's no going back. They don't need you to love the system. They just need you to fear living without it. That's how control sustains itself. Not through love, not through respect, but through quiet dependency. You wake up and check your phone. You consume what they feed. You think the thoughts they suggest. You buy the things they advertise. You chase the goals they define. And it all feels normal because everyone around you is doing the same. But normal isn't the same as real. And comfort isn't the same as freedom. The truth is, most people don't want to think. They want to be told what to think. Because thinking is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's slow, messy, uncertain. But commands are easy. Slogans are quick. Outrage is addictive. It gives the illusion of participation while keeping you passive. And the more you consume these illusions, the more you feel informed, even as your mind becomes less and less your own. Look at how often you've mistaken noise for truth. How often you've repeated phrases without understanding them. How often you've nodded just to avoid conflict. This is not your fault. This is design. Social approval is a drug. The fear of being wrong is paralyzing. And so most people build their lives not on clarity, but on consensus. If enough people believe it, it must be true. If enough people follow it, it must be right. That's the lie. That's the trap. Every system of control relies on your need to belong. Every institution that wants obedience knows how to use shame. And shame is the most efficient leash ever invented. Shame for questioning. Shame for doubting. Shame for being different. So you hide your thoughts. You swallow your doubts. You censor your voice. And you call it maturity. You call it discipline. You call it being responsible. But what it really is fear. The irony is brutal. You think you're thinking for yourself, but you're reacting on command. You think you're informed, but you're only well-fed with narratives. You think you're free, but you're terrified of stepping outside the line. That's not freedom. That's a more sophisticated cage. A cage that flatters you while it restrains you. A cage that tells you you're a good person, as long as you stay quiet. But once you start to see the strings, you can't unsee them. You notice the manipulation in the language, the framing of stories, the selective facts, the emotional hooks. You start to hear the tone behind the message. You feel the pressure behind the smiles. You read between the headlines, and you understand they don't want you informed. They want you obedient. And fear is their favorite tool. Fear of being alone. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being called out, shut down, cast out. And yet, facing that fear is the only way out, because beyond it lies something they can't control. Your own mind. Not the one shaped by trends and outrage. The deeper one. The one that sees clearly, questions naturally, resists quietly. That mind doesn't panic. It doesn't conform. It doesn't obey without reason. And once that mind wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. The system doesn't collapse because it's exposed. It collapses when enough people stop playing their roles. And most roles we play, we didn't even choose. We inherited them. We were assigned them. Be a good worker. Be a quiet citizen. Be agreeable, humble, compliant. Don't ask too many questions. Don't challenge authority. Don't trust your own discomfort. If it hurts, it's probably your fault. If it doesn't make sense, stay silent. That's how control becomes culture, by normalizing the suppression of your own intelligence. Think about how often you felt something was wrong, but talked yourself out of it. How many times you've watched obvious manipulation and called it leadership. How many times you felt a deep no in your body, but said yes with your mouth. That tension you feel, that's not dysfunction. That's the part of you that's still alive. That's the part the system couldn't reach. The one that resists, questions, remembers. They want you to believe resistance is loud, aggressive, violent. But real resistance is silent at first. It's internal. It starts when you stop believing what you're told just because it's repeated. When you stop assuming that fear equals truth. When you stop confusing visibility with value. And that shift, that moment when you begin to reclaim your own perception, is when you become ungovernable. Control doesn't require chains anymore. It only requires confusion. If they can keep you overloaded, distracted, emotionally unstable, they don't need to silence you. You'll silence yourself. You'll censor your instincts. You'll shrink your voice before anyone tells you to. You'll call it maturity. But it's fear, disguised. And fear is exactly what they want. Because fear consumes attention. It narrows your focus. It makes you predictable. This is why the system doesn't need to chase you. It builds the maze around you. A maze of endless media cycles, performative outrage, empty slogans, identity traps, clickbait empathy. And all of it feeds the same outcome. Confusion that feels like awareness. Participation that leads nowhere. Freedom that functions like a leash. You're allowed to say anything, as long as it doesn't matter. As long as it doesn't change anything real. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that once you see it, you'll notice how willingly people defend their own cages. How they attack anyone who sees too clearly. How they laugh at discomfort instead of exploring it. How they mock those who break the script, not because they're wrong, but because they're terrifying. Truth, after all, is contagious. One awakened person destabilizes the whole illusion. That's why this work is hard. That's why so few choose it. It's not glamorous. It's not fun. It doesn't come with applause. But it's the only way to remember who you were before the programming. To stop playing roles written for someone who never really existed. To finally live a life that doesn't require betrayal of your own perception. And that's not rebellion. That's sanity. That's where healing begins. Freedom doesn't begin with escape. It begins with awareness. To stop being controlled, you must first see where you've handed over control. Not in grand political decisions, but in the everyday. What you believe, what you fear, what you obey, without question. The first tool is radical self-honesty. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you strengthen the cage. Every time you avoid conflict to stay likable, you feed the system. So the first step, stop betraying your own signals. Speak when it's uncomfortable. Say no when it's easier to nod. Silence is not peace. It's programming. The second tool, reduce noise. The system thrives on overwhelm. Cut your media intake. Stop scrolling aimlessly. Choose your inputs like you choose your food. Consciously, selectively. Read, don't react. Observe, don't absorb. Give your mind space to think without being hijacked by fear or urgency. Third, make your life less dependent. Emotional freedom begins where dependency ends. Build financial skills, physical resilience, emotional regulation. Learn the basics of self-defense. How to read contracts, how to protect your data. Study the law enough to know your rights. Know how systems function, so you don't just obey, you understand. Clarity creates calm. Calm creates autonomy. Fourth, protect your nervous system. Manipulation begins in the body. If you're constantly stressed, you're easy to steer. Breathe, move, unplug, say less, feel more. Your body knows when something's off, but you have to stop numbing it. Tune in. The less reactive you are, the harder you are to control. Fifth, surround yourself with people who question, not people who perform. Your environment either reinforces your awakening or punishes it. Choose those who value truth over comfort. Build community around clarity, not conformity. That's how resistance becomes sustainable. And finally, remember, freedom isn't a destination. It's a practice. You reclaim it with every decision to think instead of react, to speak instead of please, to observe instead of absorb. You'll never be perfect. That's not the point. The point is to be unpredictable to those who expect your obedience. If these words find something true in you, subscribe to the channel. Let this message reach others who are ready to stop following. And join the Telegram. We go deeper there, beyond what platforms allow. If you see yourself in this, write in the comments, "I no longer run from the pain." Let's see how many of us are done with the lie. If you're ready to face your shadow, write, "My darkness is my power." And if something shifted in you, write, "I accept my shadow." This is only the beginning.